welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Peter Counter. I am the editor-in-chief of Fine Biometrics and Mobile ID World. November is Biometric Smart Cards Month at Mobile ID World, a 4-week event in which we are delving into the history, innovation, and promise of one of the biggest trends in biometrics, fingerprint sensor-powered smart cards. That's why on the latest episode of ID Talk, I speak with David Orme, Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for IDEX Biometrics, about the misconceptions around biometric payment cards. First, some background on the company. IDEX Biometrics is completely focused on developing useful, functional, and affordable biometric fingerprint sensors and solutions for smart cards, whether they be for use in the payments, access control, ID, or healthcare verticals. They also integrate their technologies into IoT and access control devices. My conversation with David starts on the topic of the technology, specifically the wide range of use cases for biometric cards, before focusing on the value proposition for the payment sector. We go on to talk about the findings of a new report from IDEX about the misconceptions about biometric cards before looking ahead at what's next for IDEX Biometrics, and the answers there are very exciting. And now, without further ado, I present David Orme on the ID Talk podcast. I'm joined by David Orme, Senior Vice President for Sales and Marketing at IDEX Biometrics, to talk about demystifying biometric smart card misconceptions. David, thank you for joining me on the ID Talk podcast.
Hi, Peter. Good to talk to you again.
I want to start by talking about the big picture of biometric smart cards, which from my position seem to really be poised to take the world by storm. My first question is, which verticals does IDEX Biometrics see as the best use cases for fingerprint biometric enabled smart cards?
Yeah, it's a good question, Peter. We're currently focused on 5 key verticals: payment, access control, identification, healthcare, and to a lesser extent, IoT and embedded systems. You know, there has to be a lot of coverage. There has been a lot of coverage of the payments market and our activity in payments, but it's really important to know that we're involved in multiple other markets. You know, we help people make payments. We help prove their identity. We allow them to gain access to information. We unlock devices, or we enable admittance to buildings, all with the touch of a finger.
That's really fascinating, because the main sort of talking point with biometrics in general does seem to be financial services. Can I actually ask you to expand a little bit more on the healthcare use cases for biometric smart cards?
Yeah, we feel it's important for both the patient and the practitioner to be able to confirm their identity. You know, we've heard from partners about fraud cases, about insurance issues and questions proving a person's identity. And from a practitioner point of view, we think it's equally important that things like access to sensitive records, to know that you're being treated by a, appropriately trained and experienced practitioner would also be important for the consumer. So there's a couple of examples of how, we envisage healthcare use cases.
Yeah, fantastic. That does make sense, especially for large facilities to have that card form factor. Going back to the financial services and payments area, as with many biometric technologies, financial services seem to be emerging as the forefront of innovation for biometric smart cards in particular. And looking specifically at the payment space, what are the benefits for the card issuers when it comes to biometric payment cards?
Yeah, it's really the biometric payment card has been developed to bring new levels of security to the payment card market and really bring payments into the 21st century. And as we see implementations of the next generation of authentication technology through biometrically enabled smart cards, we see a great solution that blends both convenience for the consumer user friendliness and security. So we see numerous benefits for the card issuers for biometric payments, like reducing fraud, reducing the administration cost of managing pins or lost or forgotten pins, lost or stolen cards, boosting accountability generally, and an opportunity to deliver some brand differentiation.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense, definitely from the card issuer perspective. Again, looking specifically at this payment space, what are the benefits to the consumer when using a biometric payment card, straight from enrollment up to point of sale?
Yeah, I think it's really important to place the consumer at the center of, our technology developments, especially within the payments market. And, there are a few benefits that are particularly, again, important for the consumer for biometric card enablement. So I think it is a new level of convenience. It's having not to remember, the PIN. And of course, in some geographies, the PIN could be up to 6 digits. So it's adding that extra level of convenience. It's, I think, extending or allowing the extension of the contactless limits, some which apply to an individual transaction, some which restrict the number of multiple transactions, and some, of course, limits that apply during the course of a day. And I think all of those contactless transaction limits actually can be put to one side. And there's an overall improvement to the authentication security. You have to be in possession of the card to use it for payment. So I think they're the key things for the consumer.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, especially with those limits. Those do seem to be the main consumer frustration points when it comes to contactless payments, as convenient as they are. So that's very exciting. This episode of the ID Talk podcast is brought to you by IDEX Biometrics. IDEX Biometrics is completely focused on developing useful, functional, and affordable biometric fingerprint sensors and solutions for smart cards, whether they be for use in the payments, access control, ID, or healthcare verticals. They also integrate their technologies into IoT and access control devices. IDEX is a true end-to-end biometric solutions company, and they have developed a full fingerprint biometric platform, which includes the fingerprint sensor or module, a range of reference designs and an integration kits, biometric algorithms, and an on-card enrollment solution. They have the most extensive preferred partner network regarding complementary component suppliers, including secure element providers and card inlay and prelam providers, ensuring the card manufacturers they work with get to market quicker. IDEX recognizes that embedding biometric technology into smart cards is not simple, so they make it a painless process by having everything already set up, tried, and tested. Learn more about IDEX's end-to-end biometric platform by visiting idexbiometrics.com. And now, back to the podcast. IDEX Biometrics recently worked with ABI Research on a paper about the misconceptions around biometric cards. Given that this technology is clearly very intuitive, as you were just describing, what do you think is behind these misconceptions?
Yeah, several market misconceptions remain relating to the biometric payment card, and they're largely about the physical product itself, the transactional process, security, infrastructure, and support. But I think it's only this is only to be expected, given the stage that we're at in the level of market activation and in the maturity of the technology. It kind of comes along with where we are.
That does make sense. Biometrics in general are relatively new. People have only really started to become familiar with them in the past 5 or 6 years. And so having them integrated on something as day-to-day or quotidian as a smart card that you maybe keep in your wallet or use at work, that is sort of a new idea and would take some getting used to on on a consumer level. I understand one of the main misconceptions relates to the biometric data being stored in a database, which I'm aware is totally false in relation to the IDEX solution. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. In brief, the data is stored on the card, not in a database. And just to add a little more detail, the biometric reference image that is captured during enrollment is immediately processed and transformed into an abstract template. This template is not the fingerprint image itself, and for the utmost security, it's stored within a secure area of the secure element chip. So
Mm-hmm.
just to emphasize this, enrollment takes place entirely inside the card using the standard EMV chip, and uniquely without the need to connect to a device, to a computer, or to a smartphone. That's how enrollment takes place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like a necessity. Again, the payment space is so incredibly competitive in terms of the amount of choice that consumers have. And so having to connect your card to your smartphone seems like an unnecessary headache. So it's great that that's all been sorted out. Some of the other common misconceptions around the card are around the card requiring a battery or some sort of power source, and that the biometric card won't work in an ATM network. What do you have to say about those misconceptions?
Yeah, I'm happy to clear up, these assumed issues. I think outside of enrollment, once the fingerprint sensor's stored, the card works in a passive mode, meaning that the required power to transmit the authentication signal from the point of sale is drawn from the point of sale itself. Biometric smart cards use exactly that same passive power method to complete a contractless payment transaction. So I can assure you and all of your listeners that the size and the shape of the biometric card also doesn't change. So you can still use the card in the ATM network too.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, again, like these all seem to be, very important things to set out in order to have any sort of adoption. Speaking more about the point of sale system, there's a misunderstanding that existing POS systems need to be changed to accommodate biometric cards, and that's also false.
Yeah, it's another misconception, and it's closely linked to the idea that a biometric payment card, requires a physical and embedded power source and is thus, a new type of transaction. But the fact of the matter is that, in addition, a biometric fingerprint is a security enhancement of the existing contactless payment. And, we've all become very familiar with that method of payment. From the merchant point of view, they don't need to upgrade or replace existing point of sale infrastructure. There aren't any changes on the acquiring side, either to accept, a biometric payment card. And I think, as I've mentioned before, the payment card uses the same contactless communication method as an existing contactless payment transaction, with the card drawing the power from the POS terminal in order to complete and authenticate a transaction. The biometric fingerprint card can also work for contact transactions, and the sensor is positioned to enable access even when the card's physically inserted to a reader. So even in that instance, the fingerprint authentication can replace, the requirement for a PIN.
Yeah, I mean, it's the dual interface nature of the card seems to be another crucial aspect of it. And I also really do sympathize with some of these misconceptions, just because, when it comes to, there seems to be some overlap. when it comes to the battery power, where the biometric templates are stored and matched on authentication, and where the power source comes from, it does just sort of make sense that these are all natural questions that would come up. But I think there's also some interesting parallels with the mobile wallet technologies that people have really readily embraced, and in the same way that merchants, didn't really need to upgrade their card readers for those contactless payments. It should be the same. And so again, it's a quite well thought out implementation of.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Peter. I think the experience of mobile payments and using biometrics, we're not too far away from that type of experience with a card, just touching the card and tapping as you would now for a contactless transaction. I think, we're all getting very used to, that. And in some geographies, Canada, Sweden, Australia, contactless is now just second nature to the consumer.
This question might be a little bit strange, but there are a lot of accessibility issues that the biometrics industry as a whole is sort of tackling right now. And one of the ones that seems to come up whenever I'm speaking with people who are talking about fingerprint biometrics in particular is that some fingerprint technology requires, some people don't have fingerprints. Essentially, there is, people who work a lot with their hands have them worn off and whatnot. What is the sort of accessibility proposition for a biometric card like this for people who have trouble having their fingerprints read?
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, it's a very, relevant point. And, for a start, we always recommend that enrollment, the registration of multiple fingers. And that's primarily to guard against, injury to a particular digit. And specifically, I know people have other concerns around their fingerprint. Can it be copied? Can it be misused? As I say, it's only stored on the card. Our fingerprint sensor works through measuring electrical conductance, meaning dead or fake fingerprints won't be authenticated. And if you were a believer in CSI and some of those criminal programs where fingerprints are lifted from a glass or some other object, that's also not going to work in this instance. We're really talking about someone who's in possession of the card, and they have the flexibility to use multiple fingers in the event that perhaps one's been damaged or cut by accident.
Right, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought in the idea of anti-spoofing and presentation attack detection, which doesn't really seem like it's a huge issue when it comes to these card present scenarios where you're at a retailer and using your own fingerprints. You can't just take out a fake fingerprint and put it in while there's a teller there standing with
well,
you. So.
I agree, but I think the merchant would have something to say about that, and I think equally, if someone's being threatened or challenged about using their fingerprint, then I would always advise, giving up your PIN and your card and avoiding any violent confrontation. You can stop your card immediately with your bank. So I think we just have to be practical and consider this alongside of any other challenge that the consumer would face to misuse their card.
Absolutely, and that also touches on an important point about this, is that while biometric cards add security, all of the existing insurance infrastructure and customer support does still exist through the card issuers and the banks and the payments providers. So it's pretty much just adding on something, a layer of strong identity. You've mentioned multiple times in this the enrollment process, and I understand that IDEX has a patented enrollment device that allows consumers to enroll at a time and place that's convenient to them, much like card activation now. Can you tell me a little bit more about the enrollment device?
Sure. I mean, that's completely right, Peter. We've got what we think is a very innovative yet simple on-card enrollment device. And this is something that the industry, viewed as one of the biggest barriers to adoption, which is the ability to, enroll in person on the card. And our device is lightweight. It's something that could be posted to the consumer. Its physical shape guides, the consumer through the enrollment process. And enrollment's very simple, very straightforward, user friendly, and takes less than a minute. And it doesn't, as I said before, it doesn't require any connection to a computer, smartphone, or any other connected device.
IDEX Biometrics' innovative yet simple on-card enrollment solution addresses what the industry previously viewed as the largest barrier to adoption for biometric smart cards: remote, in-person enrollment. User-friendly enrollment is known to aid adoption, as well as the ongoing usability of biometric smart cards, and IDEX has that covered. Lightweight and optimized for mail delivery, the device's physical shape guides users through the enrollment process. Enrollment takes less than a minute thanks to this user-friendly design, and once the enrollment is complete, the device can be discarded. IDEX's low-cost, seamless end-to-end solution allows card users to securely enroll themselves without visiting a bank branch. Enrollment takes place entirely inside the smart card using its standard, secure EMV chip, and, uniquely, without the need to connect the enrollment device or smart card to a computer, smartphone, or any other connected device. With IDEX's on-card enrollment solution, there is no possibility of any tampering or external interference during the enrollment process, and no need for the card supplier to support a multitude of mobile phone or desktop apps. Learn more about IDEX Biometrics' on-card biometric enrollment technology by visiting idexbiometrics.com. And now, back to the podcast. Your white paper suggests that a biometric smart card could replace multiple cards for a single user. What's the potential for biometric cards to be used in finance-adjacent applications like loyalty programs or Age ID?
Yeah, sure. No, it's well, we think it's it's great for those multiple use cases. We have to bear in mind, it's a relatively new concept, albeit fingerprint authentication, is used across many device types already, spanning multiple use cases, whether that's securely granting access to a device, some form of logical access control, physical access control, where you enter a building or you pass through some physical gate or barrier, or in fact, in payment, where it's used to authenticate, a transaction. We also think it could be used to, secure a digital signature. So, the significant opportunity to use one identity across several cases and markets, as you suggest for loyalty and ID, we think is very strong. It's a piece. What we provide together with the card manufacturer is a piece of the security puzzle. Extending and expanding this biometric chain of trust. And it's largely, targeting online devices today, but we think, it'll move to offline media in the card payment sector.
Mm-hmm. Keeping our eye on the future, what's next for IDEX Biometrics as we come to the end of the decade?
Yeah, well, I think, 2019 we could say was a year of continuing pilots of biometric payment cards. It also saw real production deployment of logical and physical biometric access cards. And I think what the future holds is, for us in payment, for instance, a card that also has a display, and that through the fingerprint, a dynamic card verification value or card verification code can be displayed as a result of the authentication of your fingerprint, and that would be designed specifically to address card not present transactions, providing a one-time password mechanism, a dynamic CVV or CVC.
That sounds like a really elegant solution to something that I think is on a lot of people's minds when they think about that, given how often people use their credit cards both for online and offline shopping. So that's really fantastic. And I know that a lot of that dynamic CVV technology does exist today. So that's very exciting. I can't wait to see that. Yep, go on.
Sorry, Peter. Yeah, I think we'll see both rollouts of biometric payment cards in production quantities in issuers during the course of 2020, and I think the future of providing a dynamic CVV or CVC will follow very rapidly.
Well, that's extremely exciting, and I'm very excited next year to get my hands on a biometric payment card for sure. How can listeners get in touch with you to learn more?
Sure. The easiest way is directly through our sales at idexbiometrics.com. That's available. Those details are available on our website. And in fact, there's a lot more information. There's the ABI research as well section of our website. It's all in our resources section. I'd certainly recommend people look at the IDEX Biometrics details there.
Fantastic, and I second that recommendation. I'm an avid reader of the IDEX blog as a person who's very interested in this biometric card technology. So give them a visit. David, thank you for joining me today on the ID Talk podcast, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Many thanks, Peter. Delighted, and let's, together with your help, I'm sure we can drive a lot of interest and activity in biometric cards.
Fantastic. Hear, hear. So concludes my conversation with David Orme, Senior Vice President, Sales and Marketing for IDEX Biometrics. Learn more about the topics we discussed and download the ABI research paper at idexbiometrics.com. Learn more about biometric smart cards by heading over to the featured articles section of Mobile ID World, where our expert editorial team has put together a timeline of major industry milestones tracing the evolution of the biometric smart card as we know it. Thank you again to David Orme for joining me. Our podcast theme music is by Legum Rad. I have been your host, Peter Counter. Thank you for listening to the ID Talk podcast.